Welcome to the Hodgypodgypod. I'm your host, Lauren Strati. Thank you for coming back to our Merry December episodes. This is number 3 of 4 for the month of December. Cannot believe next week will be our last one for December and for the year. It's mind-blowing. Where did it all go? It went by so incredibly fast. We are going to have a lot to talk about today. I will try not to dilly-dally. I will say, though, if you're enjoying this podcast, please give it a beautiful review. Share with your friends and family. This is free. It doesn't cost anybody anything. Just time. You guys can listen to it, though, wherever you go. It's not something that costs anybody anything. Well, it would cost me money and my husband money. But that's besides the point. We love doing this podcast. I love doing this. Talking to you guys, sharing all of the stuff that nobody really knows, because nobody who really goes out of their way to look this stuff up but me. I'm kind of a fact nerd with stuff like this. I love this stuff. I love teaching people this stuff. I feel like, especially if you're going into awkward holiday parties or family gatherings, you can tell people, I just started listening to this podcast, found out all this cool Christmas information about these Christmas movies. And it's something to talk about with people you may not click with immediately. Small talk's kind of tough for you. I hate small talk. I suffer. My brain freezes. I have real trouble, especially if I'm not jiving with the person I'm talking to. So I feel like this podcast can help you deal with that. You can always just, if it's awkward, you should just be like, hey, so the Hodgypodgy podcast, something I started listening to. Did you know this fact about Home Alone? Did you know that Marv and Harry had last names? I bet you didn't. You want to know what they are? And you can tell them. I feel like it's a good conversational piece to help you get through the holidays. So if you do like the podcast, share it with friends and family. Keep listening. Give it a good review. I would really appreciate it. It is definitely a labor of love for me. Something I love doing this, and I'll continue to do it even if there's only 5 people listening to it. I just love to do it. We are going to get into the show, though. Lots going on. We're going to continue our month of classic Christmas movies. We'll be talking about today our favorite animated Christmas classics, followed by my 2 movie recommendations for the week, then 2 Christmas traditions from friends and family, ending with 2 more unusual Christmas traditions from around the world. The last one I just found out about last night. It's my absolute favorite. I cannot believe that it's a Christmas tradition around the world. I love it. And I think you'll be very surprised by what it is. So, but that's at the end. We got to start with our animated movies first. I decided to start with The Polar Express first. This movie, I feel like people either love it or hate it. My family's, we don't necessarily love it. It's not one of our favorites, but it is one of those that we watch every year. And I know other people that it's one of their absolute favorites. Then there's people that think it's super creepy and they hate it. So tell me which camp you're in. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you kind of in the middle where we are? Where we understand kind of the creepiness of it. At the same time, though, we love the story and the heart in it. So I decided to talk about it first, though, because the 20th anniversary of the Polar Express is this year. So I felt like we needed to kind of honor that. So the Polar Express, if you didn't know, actually started out as a book. It originated in 1985, written by Chris Van Allsburg. And this isn't the first time that one of his books has been adapted into a movie. He actually wrote the book Jumanji. So if you didn't know, the movie Jumanji with Robin Williams, that's the one I grew up watching, was actually a book first. I remember reading that book in school too. So I was surprised to learn that it was a book. But he is the author of Jumanji, wrote Polar Express, so he was actually an executive producer on the movie. The movie was first optioned by Tom Hanks. He wanted to bring the book to life in 1999. So he decided to try and get the book optioned. However, he had one condition. If the movie was going to be done and if the book was going to be turned into a movie, it had to be a live action movie, not animated. So that was his one thing. It has to be live action. And then Robert Zemeckis, who is the one who did Back to the Future, he got involved in the project, and he was highly skeptical. I can say words. Highly skeptical of doing live action. He didn't mince words. He said it would look awful, specifically stating the movie would lose the richness of the art in the book. Plus, he figured it would cost approximately $1 billion to make the live action version of the film. But he was able to meet kind of in the middle with Tom Hanks by coming up with a different way of doing the animation. So he decided to do the first all motion capture film with Polar Express, meaning actual actors gave all the performances in the movie in a black box theater. They were filmed with motion capture equipment, and they had things stuck to their face to capture their expressions and everything had to be super exaggerated at the time because technology wasn't as good as it is now. So everything had to be exaggerated. That way the camera and the equipment could capture all of it. And it said at that point, motion capture footage was turned into animation. So you have the actor sitting in a black box theater doing all of these motions and everything with their face, with their body. It's a full thing. They're basically acting out the whole thing to be turned into an animation. They were filmed with the motion capture equipment. At that point, the motion capture footage was then turned into animation. The Guinness Book of World Records called it the world's first all-digital capture movie. It was, and normally that wasn't something anybody even thought about doing with that technology. No one dared to try to make a movie entirely with this type of animation. But Zemeckis and a team of filmmakers decided to try it. And that was the one way that they could get Tom Hanks to agree to do it. He played 5 different characters in the movie. If you didn't realize that already, it's kind of easy to tell when you watch the movie that he is those multiple characters. But he's the narrator, he's the conductor, the hobo, Santa Claus. Then there's the Scrooge-like marionette in the train. He's the voice of that. And he does the hero boy as a grown-up. Then he was also did some of the action and facial movements of the hero boy. But it was also, the hero boy was also played by, the voice was done by Daryl Zabara, who was in Spy Kids. If you remember Spy Kids growing up. He's also Meghan Trainor's husband. Just a little fun fact for you. Then Josh Hutcherson, who's from the Hunger Games. He played PETA from the Hunger Games. Did the motion capture work for Hero Boy. So the little boy we see, they don't actually have names in the book or in the movie. So he played Hero Boy for most of the motion capture work, with Tom Hanks doing some of it. So it was a mix of Tom Hanks and a mix of Josh Hutcherson with Daryl Sabara's voice, which I had no idea. Then there was, so none of the kids had names except for, there was Billy, who was the kid from like the wrong side of the tracks, who the rundown house. He was the one who got the present and didn't want to give it up. Then Sarah, who was the hero boy's sister. Those were the only 2 that you actually hear their names. But they said that they think that the reason why the characters weren't given names was to make the story universal. So everybody could all the kids that were reading the book or watching the movie could imagine themselves as the character. Since there was no name linked to the hero boy or the hero girl, they thought that it would have the kids be able to connect better to those parts and imagine themselves in it, making them like the movie more or liking the story. Then it was actually, the animation was kind of tough to get through for some people, because if you watch it, it looks real, like real people, but animated. It's exactly what it is. It looks, so it's kind of strange. Your eyes don't quite really know what you're looking at, and so you're watching it. It looks kind of real. It looks fake. Your brain's going, "What the heck am I watching?" So you either love it or not so much. Some critics thought that the movie was super creepy. Somebody said that it was a failed and lifeless experiment. And somebody at CNN said, at best it was disconcerting, at worst a wee bit horrifying. Perhaps the strongest displeasure was voiced by Jeff Pavier of Toronto Star, who declared, "If I were a child, I'd have nightmares. Come to think of it, I did anyway." I feel like that's a little harsh. I get that it's kind of weird and creepy. The heart of it, though, is there. It tries to bring the belief of Santa back to this kid who is starting to lose his belief. The story, the hero girl, also, it helps the hero girl find her voice, she becomes a leader instead of just listening to what other people have to say. She stands up for herself and leads the way. There's a lot of good little stories throughout the movie, which is why whether you like the animation or not, it still makes for a great movie. There's also some hidden Easter eggs in the movie, some from Back to the Future, because Robert Zemeckis is the director of Back to the Future, which is my favorite movie of all time. They show the emergency brake scene, which can be connected to Back to the Future 3, when Clara pulls the emergency brake to get out and run back to Emmett. There's also when the hero boy pulls the train whistle and says, "I've wanted to do that my whole life." That was something that Doc Brown says in Back to the Future 3. There's also, if you look closely, it is really hard to tell. And I had to go back several times to look at it. You can see the flux capacitor in a scene in the train when they're trying to find the pin for the brake to slow down the train. You could see it for just a split second. So there are a couple of different Easter eggs, plus the naughty little boy, Steven, who lives in New Jersey and treats his sister poorly, was Zemeckis poking fun at his friend and mentor Steven Spielberg, who grew up in New Jersey for part of his childhood with sisters. Then on top of that, the address 11344 Edbrook, the conductor shouts out, is the address of Zemeckis' childhood home. So lots of different Easter eggs thrown in there from Robert Zemeckis. That happens, the more research I do with all of these movies, the more I realize how many Easter eggs these directors and writers throw into these movies, as they should. I mean, it's their movie. They can do what they want. And it's a fun little thing to try and figure out. So there's going to be some kind of Easter eggs with one of the other movies that we're going to talk about later in the show. But for voices, like I said, Tom Hanks does a ton of the voices. Then there's the elf lieutenant and the elf singer are both played by Steven Tyler, who's the lead singer of Aerosmith, which I talked about on a previous podcast. He doesn't play the elf general, though. That is voiced by the gentleman who played Roger Rabbit in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. A couple of fun little facts there for you. So anybody needs some trivia for the Polar Express, there are some good gems in there. Plus, the Polar Express song, Believe, which was sung by Josh Groban, was nominated for an Academy Award and actually won for Best Song that year. So even though people may have thought it was creepy, didn't like the animation, they absolutely loved that song. Still a classic song to this day. And the movie was good. The movie's good. It has, I know I say this a lot about a lot of things, but it had a lot of heart with a great message. Nothing strange, nothing weird you had to explain to your kids. Just a good solid message. So however you feel about Tom Hanks, I still think that the movie is a classic that we'll continue to watch every year. And like I said, it is celebrating its 20th anniversary. So happy anniversary, Polar Express. So that is wrapping up the Polar Express. Let me know, do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you kind of in the middle? Let me know. Have you done the Polar Express train with your kids? My in-laws took my kids last year to do the Polar Express train, and they had a great time. Let me know if that's a tradition that you guys do with your kids as well. But we are going to go into Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. This was going to be the one I started the show with, but I figured I'd start with Polar Express because just kind of to get it out of the way. I wanted to honor it, but I wanted to actually focus more on the classics. I feel like the classics, which is Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I learned a lot about the original story. I had no idea that this was the origin story of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Again, when you're a kid, when you're growing up, you don't care to know. You're just watching the show. Didn't realize until years down the road there was an actual book before this. Didn't realize that the book and the special Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, not the same. It was, they're different for sure. So we're going to talk about the original story. I think that it makes me love Rudolph even more because of this story. It was created by Robert L. May in 1939 as a promotional item for Montgomery Ward. If you remember that, I think we used to have some here in California. But Montgomery Ward was a department store in Chicago. So May was a 34-year-old copywriter that was struggling with some personal difficulties. His wife had been really sick for a long time with cancer. He was trying to pay her medical bills while working, while taking care of their young daughter, Barbara. It was not a fun time for him. He was asked, though, to write this children's book as a promotion for the store. So despite these challenges, he drew inspiration from his own experiences as a shy and small child, as well as he drew inspiration from the book The Ugly Duckling. So his daughter, Barbara, actually said that she's the big sister of Rudolph because she became like that close to the story. He really included her. He made sure to include her in the writing of it. She was kind of the inspiration for it. She absolutely loved reindeer, and he just would use her opinion for different things. So she was really a big part of the story and helping him write it and making him realize that when he did finish it, that it was actually a great story. So, but he really related to Rudolph. He was an outcast, just like Rudolph was. He had skipped a grade or two when he was younger, so he was smaller than his classmates. He was a nerdy kid, and he saw himself as a loser, which, it just hurts my heart being a mom, hearing that this poor kid felt that way. Then when he started to write the book, he said, "Here I was, heavily in debt at nearly 35, still grinding out catalog copy instead of writing the great American novel, as I had once hoped. I was describing men's white shirts instead." not ideal, but he made the best of it. So he focused on writing it. He considered various different names for Rudolph. It wasn't always Rudolph. That wasn't the initial. He didn't come up with it right away. He thought about naming the reindeer Rollo, but that seemed too happy. Or Reginald seemed too, and Rodney. Rodney the Red-Nosed Reindeer. That would have been a fun one. But then he settled on Rudolph. It rolled off the tongue better. Rudolph is perfect. Mr. May, you did a great job. The idea for the glowing nose, though, came to him while watching the fog roll in from Lake Michigan one day. It ended up blocking. He was sitting there at his office watching, and he watched the fog roll in. Then suddenly, because he was trying to figure out what to do with this reindeer, how to make this reindeer stick out from everybody else. So he was in his office, then the fog rolled in, and he said, "Suddenly I had it. A nose, a bright red nose that would shine through the fog like a spotlight." There was concern, though, about the red nose because it was associated, like a bright red nose was associated with excessive drinking or alcoholism. But the author May and the illustrator who went to the zoo with May and his daughter, they went to the zoo to get some inspiration to look at reindeer at the zoo. They were able to create such an innocent looking reindeer with the shiny red nose that the executives weren't worried about it anymore. They weren't worried about the connection between alcoholism and this adorable reindeer. So they were able to move forward with that. He wrote the book. His wife had passed away during the writing of the story. They asked him if he still wanted to continue with it. He said, "Yes, I want to finish it. I have to finish it." He ended up finishing it, but he didn't have the rights to it. It belonged to Montgomery Ward. He didn't make any money from it at first. So he was facing a mountain of debt with his wife's medical bills. He was unable to market it or enjoy the profits from the story. Then May approached and convinced Sewell Avery, the company's corporate president, to turn the copyright over to him. And he was able to finally enjoy the fruits of his labor because he now owned Rudolph. It wasn't just the store reaping the benefits of it. So what ended up happening was it was a 32-page booklet with illustrations by Denver Jillian, who was the one who went to the zoo with him. It was published in 1939. The story was written in rhyming verse and told the tale of a misfit reindeer with a shining red nose who saved Christmas by leading Santa's sleigh through a foggy night. It sold over 2.4 million copies of the booklet were distributed during the 1939 Christmas season. It became incredibly popular. There was a cartoon, an 8 or 9 minute cartoon created based off of the book, which if you have Amazon Fire Stick, you can actually watch it. I just watched it the other day. We watched it last year. My kids and I watched it last year as well. It is closer to the book than the Rudolph special we all know. It's really interesting to watch because you think, what is this? You don't think of Rudolph as what this story was. The story was, though, closest to the book. If you want to know what the book says, what the actual story is, you can find it on YouTube. I just listened to it today. There was a gentleman that reads it, and you can see all the pages. You can see the illustrations and all of those things. I thought it was really interesting. Definitely different than the special that we all watch every year, for sure. I like that story, mainly because it's probably because Santa's nicer than he was in the special. He goes into everything's foggy. Santa's been struggling all night. He can't see anything with this fog. He finally stumbles his way into Rudolph's room and he sees this light. He doesn't know where it's coming from. It ends up being Rudolph's nose. Then he realizes that Rudolph can help him. And so he doesn't meet Rudolph until Christmas Eve when he needs his help. So I had no idea that that was actually the case. That was the original story. Obviously, the Rudolph special is different. So we will be talking about the Rudolph special because obviously that is the one that we all know and love. Before we get to that though, the song Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was actually written by May's brother-in-law, Johnny Marks. He wrote it in 1947 based off of the story. So they tried to it was written for Bing Crosby to sing. Everybody, though, was hesitant to record something so different because anything that wasn't about Santa Claus, per se, they were worried that it would take away from the Santa Claus. They were trying to build up Santa Claus more and more. Santa Claus was becoming more of a staple in people's homes. Everybody was finding out more about Santa Claus, what he looked like, and everything. They were trying to really stay focused on that. Also, you had Coca-Cola trying to promote Santa. You had Santas in the stores. So that was the main focus. Singers were really hesitant to sing a song that wasn't about that. Thankfully, though, Gene Autry came into the picture. He is the one that actually sang the song. He initially turned it down, but his wife really liked the song and pushed him into singing the song. So thank you to Gene Autry's wife, because that song is a song we all know and most of us love, I think. So it actually ended up selling 2 million copies in its first year and eventually became one of the best-selling songs of all time. So Johnny Marks also wrote the songs for the special. So that's A Holly Jolly Christmas, Silver and Gold, We're a Couple of Misfits, Jingle Jingle Jingle. All of those songs were written by Johnny Marks, who is the brother-in-law of the original author of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So lots of different connections which again, you have no idea. You just remember the special. You don't know anything about anything else, just the special. So I thought that was fascinating to learn all of those connections. They really tried hard to make this story, this movie, successful. It really meant a lot to May and to Marks. So and obviously it means a lot to all of us that grew up with it as well. But we will get into the special in just a second. The special was in 1964 by Rankin Bass Productions. It was adapted into a stop motion animated TV special narrated by Burl Ives. He's the one that plays Sam the Snowman. Sam the Snowman was made to look like him as well. It was definitely different, like I said, than the original. Robert L. May, though, did approve of this version. He was just happy to keep Rudolph's story going, keep it alive, spread the message that just because you're different doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. He was really happy that they were going to be capturing the spirit of the story he wrote for children. So obviously they took creative liberties to expand the story, adding in characters like Hermie and Yukon Cornelius. The Island of Misfit Toys, that was not in there in any way in the story or the cartoon. And while it significantly deviates from the original tale, Robert May did approve, like I said, of it and of the updates. The decision to make Let's see. So many notes here. So they decided to make it have a different look and have it be different than the book by using the stop animation. And it was made in Japan. So the stop animation called Animagic was produced in Tokyo by a team of Japanese animators. So the puppets ended up getting shipped back and forth between Japan and the US for approvals. One good thing about technology is that you don't need to do that nowadays. So that had to be one heck of a process, having to ship these dolls to and from, like, across the world. Then the original puppets actually ended up going missing for years. The original Rudolph and Santa puppets were thought to be lost for decades. Then they were actually rediscovered in the early 2000s. They were in really bad condition. Thankfully, though, they were able to be restored and now occasionally appear in exhibits. That would be really interesting to see. I don't know if I'd want to see that, though, because I'd like just thinking of the animation. I don't want to think of them as, like, not real, if that makes sense. Obviously, we know they're not real, but little Lauren likes to imagine that they are real in animated land. I don't know. So then, like I said, the Misfit toys weren't even a part of the book. There was one part, though, of the Misfit toy story that actually wasn't even in the original ending of the special. So if you remember, in the special, Rudolph, Hermie, and Cornelius go to the island of Misfit Toys. They say that they will, if they ever make their way back to Santa and to Christmas Town, that they will let Santa know and help Santa find homes for them. That in the first version that aired in 1964, the Island of Misfit Toy storyline was unresolved. After viewers wrote in to complain, though, Rankin Bass added the ending where Santa rescues the toys, which we now consider iconic. I understand they're trying to keep this runtime down, but you can't make a promise to these sad, depressed toys, then forget about them. And you think that kids aren't going to notice that? Kids are going to notice that these toys live on this island, sad and crying, and were promised to get a home, then forget it. And the movie just ends with Santa and Rudolph going off to give other people presents. You can't end it like that. So I'm really glad that they put that back in there. Then there was also one thing I thought was pretty funny was, do you remember, if you've seen the special, I don't know, my husband's one of those people that haven't really seen it. So if you're one of those people like that, Yukon Cornelius has this thing where he sticks his pickaxe into the snow and goes nothing and tastes it. But there's no context. He's just, it looks like, according to Sam the Snowman, you think that he's trying to taste for silver or gold. So you're like, that's weird. Is that what happened? Like, you can taste the difference between silver and gold, and that's what he's looking for. But he's actually not putting his pickaxe in the snow to search for silver and gold. There's a scene where Yukon Cornelius licks his pickaxe to test for peppermint. But it was cut from most versions that aired after the 1960s. Without it, his habit of licking the pickaxe just seems like a weird quirk. Yeah, because I watched Rudolph yesterday to see if it was actually in there, because it never really made sense. I just thought he was tasting for silver and gold. Then at the end of the movie, you see this. So in the original 1964 version, there is a brief but important scene where Yukon Cornelius licks his pickaxe and declares peppermint. It's revealed that he wasn't searching for silver or gold the whole time. He was actually looking for a peppermint mine. He says, "I'm rich. I found a peppermint mine." So that's what he was doing. He wasn't a complete weirdo, just licking his pickaxe for fun. He was actually searching for peppermint. Then at the ending of the movie, he finds it. Thank you for restoring that. I wasn't sure, because I haven't sat down and watched that movie for years. It's always been on in the background with the kids watching it. I never actually sat down and watched it. So I'm glad that I was able to see it and that they put that back in. There's also, watching it again, I had questions like why is Hermie different than the other elves? Hermie looks more human. So, of course, I run to Chat GPT and ask, and there's no specific reason for why Hermie looks human. There's a theory that he looks like that because so he can be different. It's a subtle visual cue to emphasize that he's a misfit, just like Rudolph. His different looks complement his desire to become a dentist instead of following the traditional elf duties. It's part of showing that he doesn't quite fit in with other elves, both in personality and appearance. Then another explanation could be purely artistic. They used stop motion animation with hand sculpted figures, and Hermie's design might have been intentionally human-like to distinguish him as a more relatable character. His softer features could make him more endearing for the audience. But there is no actual explanation for why Hermie looks like a human. So that's something we just will never know. I feel like that happens a lot with the movies from the past. There's these certain things that they do that we just will never know the answers to. They also, the misfit doll. If you remember in the movie, there's Dolly. She looks normal. You know, you've got Charlie in the box. You've got the train with the caboose with the square wheels. That's fine. The spotted elephant, which I don't understand why there's anything wrong with the spotted elephant. I think that elephant was cute. But there's nothing visibly wrong with the doll. So there's, of course, fan theories. Over the years, fans have speculated that what makes her a misfit is that she suffers from emotional issues like depression or abandonment. The theory stems from a line in the 2001 commentary for the special where producer Arthur Rankin Jr. hinted that Dolly felt unloved because her owner didn't want her anymore. So, deeper message is if Dolly's flaw is emotional rather than physical, it makes her story even more poignant. It could represent how not all wounds are visible, making her a symbol of how everyone deserves love and belonging, even if their struggles aren't obvious. So, again, not sure. One of those things that you just have to interpret. There's no certain explanation. There just seems to be kind of a deeper meaning you can look at overall through the movie. It's just people are different. It doesn't mean that there's something necessarily wrong with them if you have a red shiny nose or if you want to be a dentist or if you're a sad doll. There's a place for you in the world. There's somebody to love you and to accept you. And that's what the special was really trying to get to. That's what the book was trying to get to as well. There's both the book and the special do have the bullying, which my kids, sensitive little souls, they don't like the bullying part where the reindeer are really harsh on Rudolph. And so is Santa. The coach is. His parents are. This poor kid was literally born this way. He didn't choose this. He was born this way. And he's being told he can't play any of the reindeer games. He can't try out anymore. He can't be around Clarice. He can't do any of these things. Stay in your cave. Santa doesn't like you. All of these things. He's not meant to be anywhere. This poor guy literally did nothing but exist. And was being told that he basically shouldn't and to go away. And it was really hard for my kids when they first watched it. My son especially did not like seeing how the other reindeer treated Rudolph. Then when he realized that he couldn't run away from when Rudolph realized he couldn't run away from his problems and he came back home and he accepted himself for who he was, then everybody else realized that just because he was different didn't mean that it was bad. He was actually quite special. And they tried to get that message across that you are special. There's nothing wrong with you. You deserve to be loved. Which, if you know the podcast, you know I'm very big on that. It's something I definitely appreciate about that story. Let me know if you love Rudolph as well, or if those bullying parts, being a parent especially, I couldn't imagine somebody talking to my kid like that. So let me know if you are one of those people that love Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer as well. Also, if you decide to look up the book on YouTube, let me know what you think about the book. So it's definitely completely different from the special that we know and love. There's also a special, so that one happened in 1964. The 60s were like the jam for all of these holiday specials. There was also, in the 60s, 1965, a Charlie Brown Christmas. Again, didn't know any of this stuff. I kind of geeked out a little bit. I love Charlie Brown. Still love Charlie Brown and Snoopy. My kids love Charlie Brown and Snoopy as well. It is still hard for us to watch poor Charlie Brown getting bullied a little bit as well. Lucy, man, just let him kick the freaking football. Just once. Please just let him. The poor guy. There was a Charlie Brown special, though. The Christmas special was their actual first animated speaking special. They had been in commercials, and because they started off as a comic strip. If you didn't know, the Peanuts gang it was a comic strip called Peanuts by Charles Schulz. Then, as it grew in popularity, there were people that wanted to see it turn into an animation. It was in a few commercials. There was a couple of commercials featuring some of the characters. They were also featured in a special about Charles Schulz. Then Coca-Cola became involved. Coca-Cola I feel like they were involved in everything between the 30s and the 60s with all this Christmas stuff. In the early 1960s, television sponsors were often the driving force behind holiday specials. Coca-Cola being one of them. They were looking for a unique Christmas program to sponsor, and someone suggested an animated Peanuts special based off of Charles Schulz's comic strip. So Schulz and producer Lee Mendelson quickly developed a concept with animator Bill Melendez. They pitched it to Coca-Cola. The company loved the idea and agreed to fund the project. However, they gave the team just 6 months to create the entire special. Not a lot of time, because you have to, especially with the Peanuts gang just being on paper at that point with some animation, they had to create voices, create vibes, basically pull them off of the paper into life within 6 months and a tiny budget. So it was common. At the time. Coca-Cola obviously was their sponsor. Since they were their sponsor, it was common during that time to have integrated themselves into the special. For example, the original opening scene included a billboard advertising Coca-Cola during the ice skating sequence, which we don't see anymore. Then there was Linus even mentioning the brand in one of his lines. These references were later removed, though, when the special aired in subsequent years as advertising rules for children's programming changed. So those were taken out. That's why if you're like, wait, I don't remember ever seeing that, probably because you were either super little or didn't exist when it was shown with those advertisings. Then so Coca-Cola was basically the reason why a Charlie Brown Christmas special exists. Without their sponsorship, it is unlikely that a Charlie Brown Christmas would have ever been made, at least not in 1965. Their funding allowed Schulz and his team to bring their vision to life despite the tight budget and timeline. So thank you, Coca-Cola, for bringing the Charlie Brown Christmas special to life. It is absolutely 100% a classic. You can see it if you have Apple TV. You can watch it there. Or I think they air it on ABC if they haven't done so, or NBC, one of those, if they haven't done so already. It's really kind of hard to find unless you have Apple TV. So if you really want to watch it, unless you have like a DVD of it, you can get like the free trial or whatever for Apple TV and just watch it and then cancel. That's one of those things that I like to do. So a Charlie Brown Christmas was the first time the Peanuts gang got their own fully animated TV special. Like I said, it was a groundbreaking moment for the franchise and set the stage for all the beloved specials that followed. It's a great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, everything to follow, all of the different Peanut shows that were on there. Snoopy. Wow. So that was the first time. Again, I just thought that they were always on TV. I knew that it was a comic strip. I just didn't know that the Christmas special was the starting point for them to be an animated show. But it was made on a tight budget. The special was produced in just 6 months on a shoestring budget of $96,000. I don't know what that would be nowadays. But the team cut corners wherever they could. The simplicity, though, became part of its charm. The studio itself, though, thought that it wasn't going to make it. CBS executives didn't believe in the special at all. They thought it was too slow, the animation was too crude, and the jazz music completely inappropriate for a kid's show. The audiences loved it, though, and it became a holiday classic. So since it was their first time bringing those characters to life, though, they had to give them voices for the first time. That means they had to figure out what these characters would sound like. Then they had to decide that Charlie Brown would sound blah. Lucy would be bold, for example. Then Snoopy wouldn't talk. So most of the actors were, which was highly unusual for that time. That reminds me, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in the special, before I forget, was voiced by a female. Just a fun little fact I forgot to mention. Voiced by a female. In the original, they left her. They didn't credit her for it in the original. Then when you watch the DVD, her name is Billy Richards. They spell her name wrong when they give her in the credits now. So they still left it up. So Rudolph, though, is voiced by a female. So fun fact about good old Rudolph there. Supposed to be a boy. And we can get into the whole theory about reindeer and antlers and whether reindeer are male or female, but we'll keep the Christmas magic at where it's at, wherever you want to believe. If you want to believe they're all boys, go for it. If you want to believe they're all females, go for it too. But Rudolph was voiced by a female. So that's one of those little facts you can share at your family functions when things get quiet and uncomfortable for you. So back to Charlie Brown Christmas special. So when they had to give the voices, they were mostly the voices of real children with little to no acting experience. For example, Peter Robbins, who voiced Charlie Brown, was just 8 years old. Some of the kids even had trouble reading their lines, which added to the raw, authentic feel. So if you're able to watch it this year, go back and listen to it and see if you can tell that they really are children just struggling to read their lines and do the best that they can. Then Melendez, who was the animator, since they decided Snoopy couldn't talk, but he does make noise, he provided the noise for Snoopy. So those noises were provided by him. He would record himself making gibberish noises, then sped them up so they wouldn't sound human. Then there was, so I think that's pretty funny that he's just, so they decided, I don't know how I'd feel about Snoopy talking. Sometimes I wish that he would talk like Scooby. I'm not sure though. I think they made a good choice because you know what he's thinking though. They do a good job of having Snoopy express himself enough to know what he's actually thinking. So one other fact about the special that I learned was that Linus's big moment when he's on the stage and everything's focused on him was almost cut out. The scene where Linus recites the biblical story of the nativity from the Gospel of Luke was super controversial. Anything religious like that on something like that for children is still controversial to this day. So there were some thoughts that it was too overtly religious for TV, but Charles Schulz insisted it was essential to the story. It became one of the most iconic moments. It truly, if you watch that moment, whether you're religious or not, everything's focused on him. It brings everything into perspective. Everything slows down. All the chaos of all the kids, everything just stops. And everyone focuses on what Linus has to say. I could not imagine that special not having that. So I'm really grateful that Charles Schulz fought for that to be put in there. Then there's, of course, you can't talk about the special without talking about the famous Christmas tree. It was actually inspired by real life. So the scraggly, sad little tree was based on the types of Christmas trees that Charles Schulz remembered seeing as a kid during the Great Depression. Its message about the meaning of Christmas resonated deeply with audiences. So even though it was this little tree, not much to it, you can make it beautiful. You just put your love into it and it becomes something beautiful. So I like that. Everybody loves the little Charlie Brown tree. Then there was the music. The music was completely different than any other kid special. It was something when we hear these songs, we immediately think of the Charlie Brown special, right? And it's Vince Guaraldi's jazz soundtrack, and it was revolutionary. The jazzy score by Vince Guaraldi included Linus and Lucy, O Tannenbaum, and Christmas Time is Here. It was unlike anything heard in kids programming at the time. It became so popular that it's now one of the best-selling Christmas albums ever, which is funny because the executives didn't even want it included to begin with. They thought that it was boring, like it was going to be boring and kids wouldn't want to listen to it. This special wasn't even going to have a soundtrack at all. They didn't like it. So it was actually, could you imagine just listening to just kids on Charlie Brown without like all of this stuff happening without any of his music? That would completely change the whole special and make it just a boring show. So I'm very grateful that they fought to have that included in there. Then the big thing that during that time, everything had a laugh track. All cartoons, sitcoms, shows that like comedies, they all included a laugh track. This one didn't. Laugh tracks were standard for TV specials in the 1960s, but Schulz refused to include one. He wanted the humor and emotional moments to stand on their own without canned laughter. Again, these gentlemen knew what they were doing. Very grateful for everything, for sticking to your guns, especially going up against executives that have the power to make or break what you're doing, and just sticking to your guns and saying, no, this isn't happening. That's very impressive. So also something you may be sad about or may not be sad, that a Charlie Brown Christmas special may have killed the aluminum tree. In the late 50s and early 60s, aluminum Christmas trees had become a fad. A Charlie Brown Christmas is very much against these aluminum trees, and it may have played a role in killing the fad. Oopsie. Many feel like a Charlie Brown Christmas is the reason these fake trees were no longer popular by 1967. By 1967, these trees were no longer being manufactured. Oh, shoot. So, too bad, so sad. But the Charlie Brown Christmas special ended up being an instant success. Despite CBS's doubts, A Charlie Brown Christmas premiered to rave reviews and drew in audiences over 15 million. There's 15 million viewers. It went on to win both an Emmy and a Peabody Award. Classic Charlie Brown. It was amazing. It's so funny because we joke about our Spotify not shuffling, or Spotify only having, you can have 2,000, like I've got 2,000 songs on my liked and it'll just repeat 20. Or on our Christmas holiday mix, we've got 333 songs. But it'll just repeat songs that we've heard all day. Like I heard, what was it? Shout by the Isley Brothers 3 or 4 times in my shuffling. I don't want to shout anymore, guys. So yesterday, though, it was funny. I was doing my notes for this. Each of the 3 songs from Vince Guaraldi popped up on the shuffle for the holiday mix. And it was just, it brought me into the holiday spirit even more listening to those. You have to associate that with the special. Absolutely. It was, I couldn't imagine not having that special without those songs. So thank you, Spotify, for making me love those songs and the special even more. Our final special we're going to talk about, also in the 1960s, was How the Grinch Stole Christmas. That was in 1966. It was, of course, adapted from How Grinch Stole Christmas by Dr. Seuss, also known as his real name, Theodore Geisel. He created the special with Chuck Jones. Chuck Jones, he was a part of Looney Tunes. He directed, he was a part of so many different things. I connect him with Looney Tunes, though. But Chuck Jones, who directed the special, convinced Dr. Seuss to adapt the book into an animated feature. However, Dr. Seuss was initially hesitant and later commented that Jones made the Grinch look a little bit too much like himself. And in the original book, if you see it, he doesn't have any color. He's not green like he is in the special. The Grinch color was a creative choice. In the original book, he was black and white with hints of red and pink. The animators made him green because Chuck Jones thought it would stand out and give him a more mischievous look. Genius. Absolutely genius. Then there was the amount of time it took to draw. This isn't, there weren't computers. People were hand doing this, and it was painstakingly long to do this. It took 24 frames per second to bring the Grinch to life. The animators painstakingly drew and painted 24 frames of artwork per second of animation. A labor-intensive process that required incredible attention to detail. I just remember back when I was a kid with like a little thing of, on my notebook, drawing a little stick figure and making it move just a little bit on each page. And that took forever, and it was just a guy. Just a little stick figure man. I could not imagine doing all the details of the Grinch for this whole thing. Obviously, that's what they did for animation back then anyway, and that was their job. Still, though, that was couldn't imagine having to do all that work. Then, so Boris Karloff was the iconic narration. Boris Karloff was famous for playing Frankenstein's monster. His voice is very iconic. I know my husband probably wouldn't know who he was, but I know Boris Karloff. While his voice was altered to sound gravelly, his performance struck the perfect balance between menacing and heartfelt. He was perfect for that. But people often associated him with singing the song, You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch. That was actually performed by Thurl Ravenscroft. He wasn't credited, though, in the original. And so due to a production oversight, He wasn't credited for the song, leading some to believe, like I said, that Boris Karloff sang the song. Dr. Seuss, though, personally apologized to Ravenscroft for the omission. In Thurl Ravenscroft, he did the voice of Tony the Tiger. He was the voice of the pirates in he did the Yo-Ho, A Pirate's Life for Me on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride and the song. He was a bunch of different voices throughout the decades. He played Uncle Theodore in Disney's Haunted Mansion attraction, known for grim grinning ghosts. He did all sorts of different things. So he did a ton of different things. But he is the one who did You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch, not Boris Karloff. That was just the narrator of it. So the budget, though, even though they had to take so much time to create the animation for the Grinch, they were working with a tiny budget. The entire production had a budget of just $315,000, which is around, thankfully they included what it is now. It's around $2.7 million in today's money. That was considered modest even for the 60s. The animators and voice actors pulled off a timeless classic, though, even though that's what they were working with. So when we're talking about the animation, what was also had to be shown was the Grinch heart growth was literal animation magic. The scene where his heart grows 3 times was achieved through frame by frame animation, with each frame carefully drawn to show the heart expanding. It's now one of the most famous moments in animation history. Makes me want to, I haven't had a chance to watch it this year. It makes me want to go back and watch it so I can really appreciate the hard work, knowing how much detail and time went into all of this. I want to watch it again so I can truly appreciate it. But surprisingly, it wasn't a smash hit when it aired. It first aired on CBS in 1966. It was met with decent reviews, but didn't gain its current legendary status until later, when reruns cemented it as a holiday classic. So it was, when we think of it as a classic, of course, everybody loves The Grinch. There's been Jim Carrey's version and other versions done. We all know it as a holiday classic. At the start of it, though, it wasn't such a classic or a hit. Then there was, and Dr. Seuss actually had to add lines for the special. While it stays true to the book, he did have to write additional dialogue and lyrics to pad out the runtime, including some of the lines in the famous song. So thankfully, he was able to do it and do it proud. I'm not sure if anybody else could quite do the movie justice. Dr. Seuss had that ability to rhyme and create things like that connected better than anyone else. So again, it was one of those, it's a classic gem of a movie, but what's also a gem in this movie and cannot be forgotten is Max. He almost stole the show with he was so cute. Even in the remakes, he makes the Grinch it helps him seem less heartless and more human, or more Who-like. So he's loyal, his a comedic dog. He was created to add humor and heart to the story. Fans often say that he's the unsung hero of the special, enduring the Grinch's antics, but ultimately enjoying the happy ending. And like I said, the Grinch still took care of Max. He cared about him. You knew that he loved him. So if this green monster of a Christmas-hating, people-hating man could find a space in his teeny tiny heart for this dog, like there's got to be some place, like some room for him to grow and become a better person. Like he was so, even though the Grinch was so grumpy and tried to do all of these terrible things, Max just still was his loyal companion. Even trying to pull that giant sleigh with the one little antler on his poor little head. He did his best to be his Master's best friend and just stole the show. Again, without Max, I don't know if the Grinch would have been as likable, because seeing him with that dog, he had some sort of love in his heart, which made it easier for his heart to grow 3 times as big after he had that epiphany moment. So that is going to be where we wrap up the Christmas stories. There's a lot of information, I know. There's so many fun tidbits about this, all of these different specials. And the 60s were the jam, I guess, for all of these, because I had no idea. 1964, 1965, 1966, bam, bam, bam. CBS, Coca-Cola, they were all about these specials. And they did a very good job of creating these classics that we still love today. And they all have a good message. Each one of them. Rudolph with the bullying and understanding that even though people may not understand you, you're still loved and you still have a place in this world. The Grinch, even though we sometimes can understand him hating people, we get it. He found that not all people are bad, not all people want and are selfish, and they don't just want for themselves. Some are just caring individuals, and it turned him into being a caring person. Then with the Polar Express, it helped kids believe in themselves and keep believing in the magic of Santa. So, and Charlie Brown with Linus's, his classic part, and everybody making the tree beautiful when it was just like this tiny little tree, and everybody just taking the time to make Charlie Brown's Christmas tree beautiful, and that you can make something beautiful out of something that may seem weak or ugly or not worth anything, but if you take the time to nourish it, it can be beautiful. So these all have a good message that I think that we all appreciate. It's what brings us back every year, reminds us of being a kid. It connects us to our kids. My kids absolutely love these. I know I say absolutely loved them a lot. It's just, I love things a lot. So I'm sorry. I'll work on it. I'll work on choosing different words and get my thesaurus out and say different descriptive words. But we are going to go to my movie recommendations for the week. If you can guess what movie recommendation, having to stick with the theme here, I am recommending The Grinch with Benedict Cumberbatch. He does a great job of being grouchy. Just a good job being the grouchy Grinch that we know and love. He is, and you wouldn't think so, being Benedict Cumberbatch, if you don't know him, most people know him because of the name. He's Doctor Strange. So that's who he is. If you need a face to the name without having to IMDb it, he is Doctor Strange. That version of the Grinch is really good. My kids love it. They watch it every year. There's nothing weird or inappropriate or anything in it. It's not woke or anything like that. It's just a good version of the story. It's a little bit different from the book. Kind of closer to, maybe a little bit closer to Jim Carrey's version, except more appropriate than his. It's kind of right in the middle. A good mix between the original special and the book and Jim Carrey's version. So I highly recommend watching that if you haven't seen that. If you've got a Fire Stick or anything like that, I think it's on one of the apps. Then Arthur Christmas. That one, I feel like maybe not too many people know about it. He is the son of Santa. Santa has 2 sons, an older son named Steve, and then Arthur. I'm not going to use absolutely. Dang it. Choose a different word, Lauren. Arthur adores Christmas very much. He adores it loves everything about it. The children, he still has the spirit of Christmas. He's not just a businessman about it, whereas Steve is more making it corporate, kind of just like, let's just get the job done, do it this way. Who cares about the magic of it all? Then Santa's kind of a doofy guy. He's older, in his 70s and whatever, wants to retire, but he's like, screw it, I'll do one more year. Everybody's shocked. Then the movie is about a kid's present getting left behind. They didn't deliver it. And so Arthur's determined. He remembers who wrote the letter. He remembers what she said in the letter, because he's the letter reader. And he is determined to get this present to her. So she keeps believing in Santa. It's a really, really good movie. I feel like I like it more than my kids. It's just maybe because it reminds me, I used to watch it when my son was really, really little. So it reminds me of those times. I still love it though. It's a really, really good, heartfelt, warm Christmas movie. Then we're going to go to I see the time. Listen, guys, like I said before, I'm only doing one episode a week. They're going to be a little bit longer, especially with all of this Christmas stuff. Just hang in there with me. I feel like these are really good talking points with people and fun things to learn. So just stick with me. There's the traditions from my friends and family. One tradition, which I thought was funny and cute, is that one of our friends, her family always has chicken fried steak on Christmas Day. That is their tradition. So have never heard of somebody doing that before, but on Christmas Day, they always have chicken fried steak. And then my aunt says that she always loves to make gingerbread houses. That is one thing that if my kids' elves bring gingerbread houses, they normally do that every year as well. So that's a fun little tradition. Then we have the weird traditions around the world. So in Finland, on Christmas morning, Finnish families traditionally eat a porridge made of rice and milk, topped with cinnamon, milk, or butter. My sister used to make something like this, like rice pudding or something. Like, I can't remember. If she ever listens to this episode, she'll have to tell me. I always remember her making, it was kind of like oatmeal, but it was made of rice and had cinnamon and stuff in it. And she made it really, really good. I remember really liking it whenever she would make it. Anyway, whoever would find, there was, so they'd make the porridge of rice and milk topped with the cinnamon. Whoever finds the almond placed inside one of the porridges or one of the puddings wins. But some families cheat and hide a few almonds so the kids don't get upset. That's something we would do in my family for sure. We would have an almond in both, not that my kids would eat this, but we would have to put them in both because otherwise it would just be, somebody would be sad and Christmas would be ruined. So at the end of the day, though, it is customary to warm up in the sauna together. So after you have your porridge / rice pudding and find your almond, you would then get together with your family to warm up in the sauna. So that's, not sure if that's a Christmas. I would love to have a sauna, though. Gotta say, with all these people on Instagram with their saunas and their red lights and all that stuff, I would absolutely love to have both of those and just, whether it's Christmas Day or not, just sit there. So then we're going to get to my last tradition from around the world for this episode. Again, just discovered it last night. I had no idea that this was a thing. So it's a fascinating and unique Christmas tradition in Scandinavia. The tradition centers around the Disney Christmas special, From All of Us to All of You. Then it has it has it in like a Swedish way. I am not going to butcher that term. So it is like 6 words long. I'm not even going to try. So it first aired in Sweden on December 24th, 1959. So the show's format, the program is hosted by Jiminy Cricket. This is when I started to get super excited about it because I knew where it was going. It was a program hosted by Jiminy Cricket, or a local Disney character in the native language, and features a mix of Disney animated shorts and clips from feature films. The highlight is a Donald Duck cartoon. So it says Kalle Anka in Swedish is what they would call Donald Duck, Kalle Anka. Each year, it follows the same structure, creating a nostalgic and comforting sense of tradition for families. It's popular because back in the 1950s and 60s, television was a rare luxury in Scandinavia, and Disney cartoons were a special treat. The broadcast became a cherished family event, and it stuck, even as television became more accessible. Watching the program together is now deeply ingrained in Christmas Eve traditions, much like leaving cookies for Santa in the US. So in Sweden, the show airs at 3 p.m. sharp on SVT1 and is watched by millions. It's so important that streets often empty out while the broadcast is on. Denmark and Norway have similar traditions where the show is equally popular. So the show rarely updates or deviates from its original format. A fewer newer Disney clips have been added over the years, but most of the program remains the same, preserving its nostalgic charm. They're talking about a Jiminy Cricket's Christmas. That's what they're talking about. I had that on VHS. It was one I watched the ever-loving crap out of that. Like Disney's Halloween Treat was what I watched for Halloween. Watched that a gajillion times. Then Jiminy Jiminy Cricket's Christmas, I watched a million times over the years until my VHS tapes got thrown away, and I'm still very, very, very sad about it. It was one of those, though. I think you can find bits and pieces of the special, though, on YouTube. Go YouTube. But that got me, because that is one thing I miss watching every year. Is that it was something I remember sitting in front of the TV. I had already watched it a million times before during the Christmas season, but Christmas morning, I would pop that thing in when nobody else was awake yet, and I would just patiently wait for everybody to get up while I watched that. It was such an amazing show, and I had no idea that millions of people in Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, of all places, watch that. And it's a tradition. 3 o'clock sharp, they're at the TV watching that special, and it has barely changed in all of these years. So that is incredible to me. That is something that that was probably one of the most shocking things in a very good way that I read throughout all these weird traditions. There's some really, really weird traditions, guys. I don't know if I will talk about the super weird ones next week. This was definitely my favorite, though, for sure. So that is going to be it for this episode. I know it was a lot. I've had to take like 7 sips of water because of all of my talking. There's so much, though, in this episode that I think everyone will love. Share the crap out of this episode. Any of the episodes that you like. You don't have to start at the beginning with sharing these episodes. You can just find one that you like, that you truly, really like, and just share it with somebody. Help the podcast grow. Trying my best on my own to do it as well. It's, again, a labor of love for me. I love doing this. I love talking to you guys. I love doing this research and learning all of these things that nobody else really knows, because nobody really takes the time to look at it or think about it. So I just hope that you enjoyed all of this information. I'm sure I missed some stuff. There's always something I miss, and then I think the next day and go, dang it. So I try my best, though. I think there is a lot of good stuff in here. These movies, classics, specials, never are going to go out of style. I don't think, anyway. I really hope not. They are wonderful. So let me know which ones are your favorites. Let me know which other Christmas movies that are animated that you love If you have never seen Arthur Christmas and decide to watch it this year because of my recommendation, let me know what you think about that as well. Most people have seen The Grinch, but Arthur Christmas is kind of a little bit more off the beaten path of Christmas movies. Let me know what you think, though, of the episode, what you've learned, your favorite facts about all of these. Then we are, for next week, it is the very last episode of our Christmas movie special. And we are talking about Die Hard and A Christmas Vacation. Cannot wait I need to get working on all that information. So we will be seeing you next week, the day before Christmas Eve. I hope you guys are enjoying your holiday season. I will talk to you next week. Bye, guys.